Matching capacity and demand. This concept in service marketing basically tries to track how fluctuations in demand basically affect any kind of capacity constrained service organization, which could include your restaurants, courier services, airline services, uh, your call centers, theaters. Most of these service providers, they are constrained by certain amount of capacity. They cannot go beyond the capacity that they have been designed for. So when demands fluctuate, whether it is excess demand or whether there is lack of demand, this is going to somehow affect the profitability of the service that is being provided. How best can a service marketer work with the organization in such a way that the organization can make use of all their assets which they use, their capacity, their productive assets in such a way so that they can get maximum profitability out of these assets. Also called as trying to get more out of your the term which is used as productive capacity, which refers to nothing but all the resources or assets that a firm can employ to create either goods or service. In this context, we're only talking about service. So let's look at what forms can, uh, in a service context, what forms can the capacity constraint really take. One of the forms that it can take when trying to understand capacity constraint is physical facilities. Then you have the physical equipment, labor, and time. When we talk about physical facilities, what kind of facilities are we talking about here? We are talking about physical facilities which are designed to contain customers, basically trying to used for providing, for example, beds, rooms, seats in a class, basically trying to process the service for a particular customer. Uh, you see, we have this entire extended three P's, right? In service marketing, we talk about process, physical evidence, as well as people. The people aspect, the process aspect, as well as the physical evidence aspect. Here, we are talking about that physical evidence aspect, which is basically used to provide a service to the people who are basically trying to utilize the service. When we talk about hospital beds or we talk about hotel beds, there is a particular capacity. We only say when that capacity is filled, the hotel will no longer accept any kind of reservations. Rooms, when we are talking about rooms, again, we're talking about rooms in a hotel. Beds, let's say hospital, we're talking about when it comes to beds, we generally talk in terms of hospital. Rooms in a in a hotel, and classroom. Classroom only has certain set of seating capacity. Now, in a college, which probably has 120 seats being taken in a class, so beyond 120 is not something which can be taken because the class was not designed to basically accommodate 120 in a class. Or rather, if the class is split into A and B, then 60 in a class and 60 in the other class. This is nothing but the capacity constraint bound by the physical facility. The other capacity constraint in a service would be about the equipment that is basically used to provide the service. Basically, for the processing of your goods, which is basically used, for example, let's say to provide some of service to the customer, we the banking service. ATMs are used. ATM is a machine that is used. There's nothing but basically a type of machine that is used to provide the banking service to the customer. Now, there is a limit, right? There is a limit on that physical facility which is basically used or being offered. There is a constraint. An ATM can only store certain amount of money inside it, and when the money is exhausted, yes, it is refilled, but when it's exhausted, it's no longer can provide the service. Toll gates. Toll gates can only you cannot have n number of toll gates. You can only have like in a basically a road which we're talking about a national highway. We're looking at two way. One way can probably have only four lanes or five lanes. That is the maximum capacity in terms of the physical equipment. airport security detectors. So when you pass through a security detector, large airports, international airports, at one go they can probably process, let's say, 10 security, what do you say, a clearance will be there. So people can take in different routes and basically pass through the airport security clearance. But it cannot go beyond that because the airport is designed to only hold that many number of equipments. Labor is the next capacity constraint. When we talk about labor, it is the key element because we are talking about all those services where we require some kind of staff, nurses, when you talk about hospitals, waiters. If there's only a limited amount of waiters, you cannot have n number of waiters. Now, if all the waiters are occupied in different seats, then you'll have to wait till the waiter is freed up and then he comes to your seat. A call center staff. Why, when you call a customer care center, more often than not, you'll get it as busy. Why? Because they are already occupied. There are not enough. There could be two reasons. One, the organization, which is basically the call center, have staffed the call centers, did not have enough number of people to take care of the huge demand which is out there. They probably need to have more number of people staffed to take care of the additional demand of the customers. So call center staff also is basically labor. Any kind of labor centric services where you have to talk to the person. Time. Time is one of the very variable factors because time is something which you never know when you're going to have. It's going to be ideal. Demand will vary with respect to time. And in with respect to the demand, you're also going to have a capacity constraint in terms of a time. But time is a very variable factor. Understand that when we take time in terms of capacity constraint, it's very variable. It's never going to be the same. That's why we always talk variability in terms of service is also one of the characteristics of service is the variability factor, which is nothing but in terms of time. Moving further, looking at now that we know what are the capacity constraints that we're talking about when we talk about the entire concept of matching demand and capacity, let's try and understand the demand patterns. Now, you need to understand that demand patterns also fluctuate over a period of time, but demand patterns generally are measured by market segment because it's the kind of people that you are serving to, the kind of service organization that serves to uh, different category of people, and based on the different category, different segment of people that you offer, the demand will vary. Let's take a very simple example of a repair and maintenance service. Now, which how do repair and maintenance? We look at garages, small time garages. They're completely dependent on walk-in business. Okay, so whenever you have different types of walk-in for some kind of says a breakdown of a car and he has come for some emergency repair, or somebody has come for preventive maintenance. Preventive maintenance happens on a very regular basis. Let's say there is a contract over a period of time. There's a large scale contract. A small garage has got a large scale contract where periodically they maintain and they service the vehicles for a particular organization. This is a very this demand is something which is very fixed. You know that you're always going to have business coming in from this contract kind of a deal. Walk-in could be the additional people who just have a breakdown and come in, or people just walk in business is something which is hard to predict or control because on certain days of the week there might be more, certain days of the week there might not be any walk-ins at all. So demand patterns will vary based on the market kind of segment that we are basically trying to talk about in terms of what basically categorization is what we're talking about in terms of say market segment. Predictable cycles. Now, certain cycles are very predictable. When we talk about summer, winter, we know that during summer, if we talk about vacations or resorts, we know summertime is the time when people travel, and people are going to have kids are going to have off from school, and they're going to take off summertime. You're going to go on a vacation, so you know these resort services is going to be full around that time. Winter time, people who visit during winter, you know that it's very predictable. You know, around this time you're going to have business. Rush hour, transport services. Transport services, basically public transportation services, make the best most of the money. Like you know, you look at our public transport, the Mangalore city bus transport or any other bus transport service, they make their maximum money during the early morning when people go to office, people go to their colleges, or late evenings when people return back to their homes. The afternoon time is a very non-peak hour, non-rush hour basically. So it's a very predictable cycle of business. Demand is very measurable. Then there is a third category when demand pattern is very random. You may not be able to predict what is really happening out here. People dying. You never know how many people are going to die on a particular day. So the hospital service required, people rushing in, accidents, people coming in. There are enough number of, so your beds, your ICU beds. You never know how much beds you really require in ICU in a hospital. It's never predictable. Now you can see one of the one of the things that was faced around this time was COVID. And hospital bed was a big issue because we were not really prepared for something like this. Not prepared to have a outbreak, a pandemic, and it's not something you plan every day. It's something which is very random. There can be a natural disaster, there can be an earthquake. When all this happens, you'll have other services coming into place. You'll have your firefighter service, you'll have your police service, ambulance drivers, driving service. All these people get into play. This is not something on a daily basis, um, there's a building that has fallen somewhere, and suddenly you require firefighters there. It's just something which is very random. It's not something that happens every day. It is very important, understanding all this, that it is very important for any business, any service organization to chart the demand patterns. If effectively they've been able to chart the demand patterns, you'll be able to match your capacity to your demand, which is the entire concept what we are trying to learn here. What is the implication of what we are trying to learn? Why are we looking at all these demand patterns? Why are we understanding the capacity constraint? Because we are trying to match capacity and demand. We'll see further the strategies on how to do that, but let's further understand demand patterns. A question like, if we have to look at the cause factor, different questions can be asked. If we're looking at the cause factor in terms of demand, do demand levels follow a predictable cycle based on day, week, month? What are the underlying causes of these cyclical variation? If there is a cyclical variation, it could be any of these seasonal changes. I just spoke about climate. It could be anything. It could be about school hours, vacation hours, wage, salary payment dates, end of the month, beginning of the month. Around that time, people are going to spend. When they just got their salary, that the people are going to start spending around that time. So, these are the things which are very predictable. Do demand levels seem to change randomly? If so, what is the cause? Can demand for a particular service over a time be disaggregated by market segment to reflect such components as follows? Yes, basically in terms of this is something the first thing that I spoke about. Trying to segment it out so that you can basically understand the variations for a particular type of customer. Now let's understand the different combinations of capacity and demand. Now that I've understood capacity, I've understood demand. One of the things you can have is excess demand, which is never good if you do not have the capacity to take care of the business. Excess demand, what it generally does is that the level of demand, when it exceeds the maximum available capacity, some of the customers will be denied service. What will happen is your business will lose. They'll go to somebody else who will provide a similar service. They've come to you. They realize that, okay, you already have enough demand. They probably have to wait in a line. They wait in a queue. You do not have enough people to take care of them. Probably they're coming in, let's say, phone service. They've entered a Airtel showroom and they realize, it's just too much. There's no place to actually, take care of their needs. They may just go on to some other showroom. Demand exceeds optimum capacity. Now, there is a level of optimum capacity, which is basically we say the best capacity that you can reach. But if you exceed that, no one is turned away because you're having good, you're reaching your optimum capacity. Demand is exceeding, but conditions are crowded. You know that people will stick to you. Your service quality will deteriorate because you're trying to please everyone. You're trying to handle this person as well as that person, and customers feel that they're completely dissatisfied. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Demand and supply are balanced at the level of optimum capacity. We're talking about the third one here, which is the best thing that can happen. Staff and facilities are busy without being overworked. Customers receive good service and without delay. So everyone's happy. It's like a win-win situation. Access capacity. In this case, demand is very low. Here we are basically going to, what you say, you're basically going to waste your resources. You have too much of capacity, very low demand. Demand is below the optimum capacity. The productive resources are underutilized as a result in low productivity. But there's also a risk that customers may find the experience disappointing or have doubts about the viability of the service because they're not seeing that perception comes into the mind of the customer that there is some kind of doubt with the viability of the service because too much of people but very less people are actually taking that service. So excess capacity also is not good. Excess demand is not good. Somewhere you need to be demand and supply at a balanced level, but understand that these combinations we are making, which is what is very practical with any service business, but trying to predict this is something of which is always going to be a challenge, and trying to chart out a demand pattern is always going to be a challenge. We're going to look at in the next video what are the strategies to be able to match demand to capacity. Two ways: one, you change your capacity to match demand, and one, you try to change the demand to meet capacity. How do you do both? We'll look at it in the next video. Thank you so much.